that people come in my house, by my invitation, eat my food, and say foolishness at my table. And I'm like, well, you can't come to my house no more now until the Lord help me love you better, because we are not aligned.
Yep.
Right? But I tried. Jesus.
Welcome to the Revive Podcast. I am your host, Fredy Romero, and I am so excited that you're joining us today for this very special episode. This is going to be one of those episodes like I just know. And so I've got my pen ready. I've got my notebook ready. I am ready to talk to our guest today, to your guest today here on the Revive Podcast. Let me talk to you about Natasha Sistrunk Robinson. All right. And I'm going to read this because this, I could tell you so much about her and I would spend 20 minutes on her bio alone. But just let me give you the stuff that you just need to know, because some of you guys need credibility, right? So let me just give you a little bit of this. Natasha Robinson is the president of T3 Leadership Solutions, which I want to talk to her about. Why did she name it T3? And it's a great insight on that. But she is also a sought after international speaker, executive leader, and mentoring coach with over 20 years of leadership experience in the military, federal government, church, seminary, and nonprofit sectors. Like, she is the real deal. We've met other people that have worked with her, and they all vouch for who she is and her work. Natasha is also the host of a podcast, A Sojourner's Truth, Conversations for a Changing Culture. Now, I know you're listening to this podcast because you consume podcasts. That is one that you need to put on rotation, because I listened to season 1. She has 3 seasons right now. Mm-hmm. I listened to season 1 and it was very touching. And so it's completely different than this, and it's actually going to elevate your podcast game. So make sure you follow that as well. She is the visionary founder and chairperson of Leadership Links, where she cultivates a multi-generational network of influencers who offer leadership education that facilitates impactful living, character, and spiritual development. She has gone to seminary and is a graduate of Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary in Charlotte, and she also from the U.S. Naval Academy. She is an author, and this is the coolest thing, how God orchestrates things. She is an author of notable books, different books, but one of those books includes The Sojourner's Truth, right? Mm-hmm. Choosing Freedom and Courage in a Divided World. But her new book, Voices of Lament, this book right here, we got this last week when it came. We got this when it came out. This book right here, you need to add it to your bookcase. You need to add it to your book collection, but not just to display it. Like, you need to dive into it. Let me tell you a little bit about it. This book is inspired by Psalms 37. Voices of Lament is a powerful collection of reflections from Christian women, and 29 of them actually, of color, on themes of injustice, heartache, and deep suffering. And it features their essays, their prayers, their poems, their stories, and they share a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of things that in fact, there are some women that wrote in this book that actually tell you that these are things that they don't commonly share. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to get an inside personal look into what it means to lament and what grief looks like in other cultures. And to be honest, and it's something we might talk about today, how other cultures actually grieve and lament better than we do here in the United States. And so, Natasha, I could just go on and on and on about you, but thank you so much for writing this. Thank you so much for, taking it upon yourself to create this project in collaboration. It's such a kingdom, such a display of the kingdom of revelation at every tongue, tribe, and nation. Thank you so much for being on our podcast today.
I'm so glad to be here, Fredy. I'm excited about it and so glad that you invited me to come.
Awesome. I wanted to, start off with this book that we are encouraging everyone, and we'll have the link on our bios as well in our captions, so that everyone can go get this at the local bookstore, because you and I love bookstores.
Yes, we do.
So, thank God for Amazon, because it gets us our stuff, like super quick. Yeah, but I do want, everybody to go to the local bookstore. But with your experience, Natasha, and your upbringing, and we might touch on some of that today, but I know that there's other podcasts and there's other shows that you've been on, and there's other content out there in your blog, which people can find on your website, that share your story. I feel like you might have had the pedigree already to write Voices of Lament by yourself.
Right.
Why did you take it upon yourself to include other women, and not just other women that look like you? Because that's also, a thing sometimes, like, we create an echo chamber, inclusion, but it's an echo chamber. What led to that? Why did you take it upon yourself to include other women in their stories, and not just like, because it's not uniform. Some of them are poems, some of them are essays, some of them are stories, and just give them the freedom to express themselves the way they do.
Yeah, I'm a very communal person. I actually like doing stuff with other people. And sometimes that's very challenging, but I also kind of revel in that challenge a little bit. But I also feel as a part of my own discipleship that I could really learn a lot from God's people. And so when you mention the Revelation passages, when, it says at the end of all of this, which is really a beginning for us, right? There will be people from every tribe, language, nations, and people groups. And I just feel that I get a better sense of who God is by engaging with his people. And so I think that's very, very important. I also think, like, we wrote this during the pandemic, most of it, right? And so for that, people were in need of intimate connection. And so even when we started writing this, people were not physically going anywhere still. This was like in the summer of 2020 when we actually started writing. And so we actually created a community for each other and a source of safety. We met once a month, and we're still meeting once a month, and we'll be doing that until almost to the end of the year. And so what happened was, at a time when people were isolated and there was so much anxiety and depression, for us, we found safety in each other.
Wow.
And so that was a beautiful thing. And so it was the writing, but it was also the community that was happening in addition to the writing.
This community that you talk about, because that's something that we're big here at Revive Church. We always say, and I mean, we didn't invent this term, but don't do life alone.
Right.
Was that something that you created for women? Is that a space that you created for women because of the pandemic? Is that something that you continue to do? Because I know you're a coach and you're a mentor, and I know season 2 of your podcast dealt with mentorship. Yeah. Why did you create this space and community?
Well, a lot of my mentoring philosophy, I have a certain specific things I intentionally do. So for me, it's very important for discipleship and mentoring that we're trying to intentionally seek out intergenerational relationships. I think that's very important. I think it's important that we have interracial or multi-ethnic relationships and I mean that in the most authentic ways, and not just inviting people just so we could say we have different colors represented in the room, right? I think that's important because we have so much to learn from each other. And what we learn, even in this community, even when you say someone is Asian American, that's different countries represented. And some of those countries have issues with each other. Yeah. There's certain classism that happens within that. When you say someone is Hispanic, like, that's different countries represented. And so we get to learn so much from each other. And so that's just something I've always wanted to do in my discipleship. And because I get joy from learning and learning to love and be loved in that way. But I also get challenged as a leader in that. And I also think that we all are better together as a result of it.
Yeah, absolutely. You keep mentioning this word discipleship already. And oh my gosh, like this is the first time that I get to meet you.
Yeah.
And it's so awesome to see how aligned we are, in what's important. For you, creating community, why is discipleship such a priority for you? Why is it the thing at the forefront of your mind? Because other coaches who are believers, and I'm not trying to throw shade at anyone whatsoever. This is not my intention. I am not that kind of podcaster. They normally do community because they are, beta testing something, or it's it's a case study. Yeah. And so there's an end to this relationship. Whereas discipleship, that's like very deep, personal. And so the fact that you can take a professional setting and community that has an agenda, that has a purpose, but but in your mind, hey, this is discipleship. Why is that so important to you?
Well, I've participated in a whole bunch of books, right? I've done some quote unquote what were supposed to be collaborative book projects before, which were not actually collaborative. Basically, they'll send you a contract, ask you to write a chapter. I write my chapter and I'm done. And I won't even hear about other parts of the book, who's involved in the project, the specifics of it, until the book actually comes out. And so when that happens, it's like I'm not as invested in the project. It's not really my project. It was my chapter. And so I don't even know if what else is being presented in the book is in alignment with my values and who I am. And so I'm less excited about the end product. I have integrity for what I delivered, my piece of it. And for me, I didn't want it to be Natasha's book, to your point. If it was going to be my book, I could have just written it on my own. I wanted it to be reflective and representative of who we are as people. I wanted us to get to know each other as people. I wanted there to be a sense of love and devotion and care and empathy and understanding and psychological safety between us, as people, so that when the book came out, the people who had contributed pieces on the project felt like this is mine. They have ownership of it. And it's something that they can share with their communities and feel good about it, right? I think that's very important. But also, I think that Jesus has shown us the way, right? And so when I see Jesus, and I think about his discipleship, the 3.5 years or so of his earthly ministry, he was very intentional in investing in small groups of people over a long period of time. And that's where he had the greatest impact. And to me, that's my mentoring. That's my discipleship philosophy. Like, we are shaped as humans and as leaders by place and by people. That's it. And so when you see me and you kind of read my bio and said, oh, these are all the things, there is no way I could have done any of those things without the mentorship, the discipleship, the tutoring, the coaching, the sponsorship, the care I've gotten from people throughout my life, right? That makes the person that you see sit in front of you today, who is influencing and now doing this for other people, because I've been mentored in that way.
There's so much there, Natasha. So let me ask you one question right now, and then maybe the other one after. You said, "Hey, I wanted to do this the right way, to include people the right way." I do feel, and as a person of color, one of the things we knock on the door because we want to be included. We want an invitation to the table. We want equity. But sometimes, we don't also want to be the token person. Right. And a lot of churches, when we see the suffering of Black men and they're getting killed unjustly, we can already expect a panel. Yeah. For that Sunday service. Right. And we do that. We include voices that otherwise we probably would not have on stage, right, or platform. Right. And then that Sunday goes away and nothing comes out of it. Right. What would be the right way for us to include voices, to invite voices? Because we do want to be diverse. We do want to model the kingdom. But we also don't want people to feel used. We don't want to check off a box and say, hey, at our church, we have X amount of Latinos and Asian Americans and Black people, etc. So what are some of the wrong ways that you've seen, maybe even ministries, churches practice inclusion? Yeah. And what are some of the right ways that we could practice that?
I don't know if it's a goal in our churches, even our multi-ethnic ones, to practice inclusion.
Okay. Tell me about that.
I don't know if that's a goal. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be. I'm just saying I haven't seen that be a real goal. Okay. And what I mean by that is a lot, not all, but a lot of the multi-ethnic churches, and I'm a member of a multi-ethnic church, that I've witnessed over the years have been, even when they have diversity in the pews, so to speak. And so according to multi-ethnic kind of church practice, if you have 20% people of color, you kind of on your way. Because what they're saying is that you have a critical mass and that should somehow impact the culture of the space.
Yeah.
And I say it depends, right? Depends on the space. And what I mean by that is my husband is a Black man. I'm a Black woman. And we've always been in professional work environments with mostly white people and mostly white men. So it doesn't, me going into a multi-ethnic space where I'm a minority, it's just another day, just another Thursday. You understand what I'm saying? And so that doesn't necessarily mean that you've accepted me or you understand what it means to be a Black person in America, that you even care, about the things I'm struggling with. That doesn't say that. It just says that, oh, you can come here. You have been invited. We may tolerate you. But that doesn't mean that it's a multicultural space. And it does not mean that the space is trying to create equity, meaning that what does your church leadership look like? And not just the diversity of race and ethnicity, but also culture, right? Because what I've experienced is most multi-ethnic churches are still very white cultured. And so the people of color that are in those spaces are already, quite frankly, are assimilated in some other way because of their professional work environments.
I see.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that is not necessarily a multicultural space, and it's not necessarily an equitable space. And so I think we have to do more work, even when there are different people groups in the space, when there's different colors in the room, to ensure, if we really want equity, if we really want to understand the people that are present, and to have what I would say is mutuality, right? So what we see in Ephesians 5, like submit yourselves one to another as unto the Lord, right? So if the Lord is leading us and there's mutual submission, then that means the way we worship and the way we practice cannot just be always or majority ways what's acceptable and comfortable for white people.
Oftentimes, it's really hard to say these things in front of our white brothers and sisters, and you said something, we just don't need the inclusion of people. It's culture as well.
Yeah.
I think in our groups, even when we try to, I completely understand what you're saying about, maybe not a lot of ministries or churches make that their goal.
Yeah.
Right. Make inclusion and diversity their goal. And you see that it is acclimated. You see it in the songs that we sing sometimes. You see it in the
right.
You see it in the practices that we have. And I do completely see that often. And so what are some of the steps that we can take, even personally? Like let's take it at a macro level. Like I'm a pastor, I'm a senior pastor of a church.
Yeah.
And let's take it at a micro level. I'm just Fredy, your local baker.
Right.
How can I live a life that wants to be have diverse ages and ethnicities and cultures in it, so that I understand God's people? Because I love what you say. There's another podcast, I forget whose podcast you were on, but you said that relationship with a diverse group of people allows me to see God better, because we are all created in His image.
Right.
It's just, I love that concept.
I believe this.
So, I'm like, okay, I see it. I'm starting to see this, right? So if I'm a senior pastor of a church, what are some of the steps that I can take to practice this in my life?
Right.
And if I'm just, not in vocational ministry,
right,
how do I practice this in my life?
Right. So I just what little I learned, and here's the thing I want to say too. Natasha does not get this right all the time. Natasha is also on the journey, right? And so what I mean by that is what little I've learned, what's beautiful to me, what would be just like, say, a beautiful Sunday morning of worship at church, right? If there was truly equity in a space and cultural celebration in a space, then that would mean, one, we wouldn't be on the clock, right? Because it's Sunday, right? Because that's very much, we have to be out here in an hour. is one, not how I grew up as a Black person.
Or Latinos.
I know, right, and our indigenous brothers and sisters would certainly not. So that service would start with some kind of honoring, about our indigenous brothers and sisters, and whatever they feel that is, right, and there will be people speaking and singing in different languages, right, right, and some people will be dressed up because in my culture, you dress up to go to church, right? And to not do that would actually be dishonoring or offensive, right? So to say in our common culture, modern culture, say, oh, well, you dress down because we don't want people to feel excluded. But then it also says to me that the way you've done church has been wrong. Right. Wow. And so there will be some people dressed to the nines at church because that's their culture. Nigerians going to come correct every time because they're going to give their best to the Lord. Yes, you know what I'm saying? Yes. They're going to. So some people going to be dressed, in heels and something would be equivalent to a prom dress, and some people going to be in sandals and sneakers and whatever, or flip-flops, and that's fine, right? And that's what the Sunday morning will look like. And sometimes there'll be a man preaching. And sometimes there will be a woman preaching, and sometimes there'll be a child reading the scripture, and sometimes there'll be an elderly person. Because where the elderly people at, right? Somebody, there will be testimony service, right? There will be people telling about the goodness of the Lord, because the word says we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the power of their testimony. And so we have this culture where only thing people care about on Sunday mornings is what's happening at the pulpit and the authority of what's happening in the pulpit. And my thing is, it's like, it's good to have authority, right? And we have to get God's people understanding the authority we all have as the priesthood of believers. And so we have to engage people, train them up, teach them, give them opportunities to practice what they have learned. Yeah. And if we start seeing that on Sunday morning, I think, our experiences of worship will be different. I think the way that we disciple people, there'll be an intergenerational work. There'll be a multicultural experience. It'll be beautiful. And if we eat afterwards, then you have a buffet. Right. And then everyone can choose, from different things. And even in that, we're learning and we're growing and we're getting to see the beauty of God's diversity, that God first presents himself to us as creator. Right. And so part of this, us being created in God's image, is the diversity that God already has within God's self. As Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Wow. The beauty of that, the diversity of that, the power of that we don't see because we're so one note and one dimensional. And we have taught people the culture of this is how you do church. And so if people don't resonate with that, then they assume that something's wrong with them or something wrong with God, or there's no place for them. Right. And I'm saying that's a missed opportunity for us as a church, because I believe that we have an opportunity to present better the fullness of who God is.
For sure. I think, as I'm taking down notes, used this word testimony, which, Voices of Lament does so well. In, I mean, another way of saying it is sharing your story. Yeah. If I evaluate my life, if someone that's listening right now is evaluating their life and goes, you know what? I don't have any Black friends. I don't know any Latino. I don't know any indigenous people. I don't know. I'm in a bubble. Mm-hmm. What is the advice? Because, I mean, we get a knock on our doors sometimes by people are like, hey, we want to invite you over to, like, how do we not make it weird? How do we how do we even let people know, like, hey, I'm on a journey, right? Of trying to learn, right? And see God, who I love that you said as creator, right? And the diversity that even exists within himself. What would be the approach? What would be the appropriate approach, to start to practice that discipline in our lives of inclusion and diversity personally?
I think, well, one, depending on where you live, that might be okay, right? There may not be an opportunity for you to meet. Right, yeah. I mean, if you're in the Midwest, it's no Black people, in certain places. I mean, there's just some, spaces where that might be okay. However, I think there are some things that privilege offers you, and not everyone has privilege. So if you are privileged to read, then start there. Right? If you are privileged to read, then start there. Because even when someone invites you into their home, which is a very simple and vulnerable act, you don't want to go into someone's home and offend them. I've had that happen, right? That people come in my house, by my invitation, eat my food, and say foolishness at my table. And I'm like, well, you can't come to my house no more right now until the Lord help me love you better, because we are not aligned.
Yep.
Right? But I tried. Jesus. I tried. You understand what I'm saying? And so if you have the privilege, read. Start there. That's number one. If you have the privilege to have access to technology, watch. Right? There's a ton of documentaries. And this is the thing too, you do have to be discerning and selective. And this is why, with social media, what the enemy means for evil, God can use for good. Right? There are people you can follow, trusted voices and advisors, people like writers in this book. I'm not saying you have to agree with everything they say. I don't expect you to. I'm saying they are presenting, they are reading, they are wrestling, they are learning, they are trying. And you can be on that journey with them through the gift of technology, social media, and then, when there's certain movies that come out that I think create great discussion opportunities. I think there's certain documentaries you can watch that create, growing up as a kid, we had a PBS, Public Broadcast Network, and I know people aren't doing that TV in that way as much anymore because we have all these streaming devices and it's so easy to just kind of lock into your thing. What I'm saying is we have to be a little bit more intentional in the material that we engage and what we access.
Yeah.
And I think when we do that, what it does, it allows us to become more conscious, and it replaces the narratives that we have been told about the other, which may not be true. And we need to do that because the narratives are pervasive, they're consistent, they're loud. And because we hear it so frequently, we then assume that what we're being told is true. And a lot of times it is not true. It is not true. And we won't know that unless we go directly to people, and let them tell us the truth about themselves.
That is beautiful. It just, you take such a complex practice and you've simplified it to practical application. Mm-hmm. Like we cannot, if you're even listening to this podcast or watching this, you're already, as you said, Natasha, you're already privileged and have the ability. We know that you have. Right.
There are a lot of podcasts you can listen to. There's a ton of great ones out there.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I love that you make this, because, for some people, this just seems like a lofty goal, to go from zero. And now, this is just a beautiful, beautiful concept. One of the things that I see, I know that you love the local church.
I do.
I know that you've been a part of the local church you use this word, sojourner, right? Someone that is on a journey, mm-hmm. and is on a path. Mm-hmm. For a lot of young people, they use that as an excuse to say, well, I can't settle. I can't settle roots. I can't grow. I can't stay at a church because I haven't found the perfect one for me that has all my values, right, and does things the way I want to do. And it's not, And so I imagine, I don't know, mm-hmm. but I imagine for someone that has a vast experience, I could talk about all your experience all right. day, and I would love to have you on this podcast again so we can discuss some of that stuff. But I imagine that even choosing a local community, mm-hmm. For you, there must have been a process for it. Mm-hmm. And there must be some sort of self-talk that you give yourself through prayer and through meditation that says, right. Hey, you got to stay here, right. Whether it's to affect change or to contribute to lend your voice to right. the community. But how what would your encouragement be for those that do feel like sojourners and they just feel like they don't have a home, right. to find a local church, a local community of believers to be a part of?
Yes. So and there's a lot of dynamics at play. Mm-hmm. There's a ton of dynamics at play. Let me say this. a few things. I love the church with the big C, which is the organism, which is the people of God, which the Bible calls the bride of Christ. I love the church, God's people, because God loves his bride. Right? Mm-hmm. So I want to be a disciple who loves what God loves. That's number one. So I love God's people. And, one of my recent projects I released is the Exodus Bible study, right? And what the Bible says about Israelites, which is true about us, we are a stiff-necked people, right? And so sure I'm saying I love God's people, understanding that we are not perfect. I am not a perfect person. We are not perfect people. And so there is no perfect church with a little c. Now I'm talking about the local congregation of believers or the people that assemble themselves together in a building. There is no perfect church. Okay? We need to understand that. And even the church in its imperfection, though, can provide opportunities for our growth and maturity and discipleship. It can provide some security and safety for us. It can provide some accountability for us, right? It can provide some humility for us. And I have rarely been in a church where I've been completely satisfied with all the things. There are concessions that you make because it's not perfect and you're not perfect.
Right.
That being said, though, I love the local church. I've always been a member of the local church. I suspect I will always be a member of the local church. And I want to encourage young people to say this. There's a whole saying be the change you want to see in the world, right? What I am not saying, I'm going to be very, very clear. Do not stay in relationships that are physically, spiritually, or psychologically abusive to you. Let me say that very clear. I want to say that first because I think there are churches that are toxic and harmful and people need to get out.
Yeah.
So I want to say that, okay? If you are not in a church environment like that, I'm saying because we're on a journey and because discipleship is a process and sanctification is a process, right? Being a disciple means you're an apprentice. You're a student. You're a follower. You're learning. You're following your teacher, your rabbi. In this case, is Jesus, right? And so what we're doing as disciples, that we're all doing that together. We're trying to follow together. And so my point is, there are things that I learn in community, right? From the pulpit, when someone else is worshiping, when we're engaging, going back and forth in Bible study, when we're praying and interceding for each other, when I'm able to serve and be served. There are things I'm learning there that I don't get in my private time.
Right.
And I get a lot in my private time, right? With the Lord. But there are things I get in community because we are a communal people, because God is a communal God that I do not get when I'm detached from consistently. The Bible says, don't forsake yourselves from assembling together with another. Now, here's the thing. There are people who have other Christian communities where they fellowship with regularly and they do those things. I personally don't have a problem with that. I don't. But if that's not a community that you have, normally the first place you get that kind of community is either in your family or with church, the local congregation. Yeah. And so my encouragement to young people would be this, or people that are kind of weary or unconcerned. Here's the thing. I wanted to say know what it is that you value, but the truth is sometimes we don't know what we need. The Bible says we don't know how to pray as we ought, right? So that's the thing. Sometimes we don't know what we need. And this is also the beauty that community offers. That community helps us better see ourselves.
Yeah.
Our gaps and the areas where we are missing the mark. And sometimes when we're doing well, community can call out your giftedness. Community can see your leadership when you might not see your own leadership. So when you're not confident or you're doubting, you don't know which way to go, community, the wise counsel of witnesses and believers can help you discern that. Please don't make a decision about who you're going to marry without community.
Ooh.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm just saying community can help you with parenting. Like when sometimes I think I'm like failing as a parent and I talk to other parents and I'm like, oh, we all having the same conversation. We're all doing the same thing. And so my point is, I think it's an act of humility to commit to any relationship. Any relationship. I've been married for 18 years, got a 15-year-old daughter, have friends I've been friends with all of my adult life. None of those relationships have been perfect. All of them I value deeply. All of them I'm a better human because of. All of them I love more deeply because of those relationships. And the reason I'm able to do that is because I haven't quit on the relationships. And those people haven't quit on me. And so that's the beauty you get of being in church. And so I'm always going to be an advocate, a proponent of people, encouraging people to be involved in the local church and to invest. Don't just come be a pew sitter and a seat warmer. Like invest in your local church and allow your local church the grace and benefit of investing in you.
Beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. Natasha, you talk about community, you talk about belonging, you talk about making decisions, you talk about these things. And now, so, we talked about, the I don't want to say the plight, but just the journey of young people. But now we have some older folks.
Yes.
In our communities.
Yes.
And I think there's a responsibility with experiences and knowledge and wisdom that you gain over the years that only time can teach you, right?
100%.
That only time can teach you. You have had vast experiences. I mean, you were an athlete in high school. You used to run track, right?
Yes, sir.
Used to run track. And you had good grades and you came at a crossroads where you had a decision where, schools were coming after you with scholarship offers, but they were athletic scholarships. And you decided not to go to any of these schools because in case you were cut, you knew the ramification was, okay, they're going to take away my scholarship. Mm-hmm. You talk about this person. I think it was Papa Corsi. Someone.
Yeah. Look at you. Yes. He's my Western civilization teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about him, or tell me about someone that where you because you said, don't get married without being in community. Don't make the decision to get married without community. And that's a huge one. Speak on that. Huge. So for you at that time, it was what college to go to. And you chose the Naval Academy. Yeah. And he was a part of that.
Yes.
And you said he was a white man, right? He was. So to either tell me his story, because I'm now intrigued, right? Yeah. Like I look at you and I look at what you've done with your life, and I'm like, but maybe if that person, you weren't in community and you didn't have the humility, and then he didn't see the responsibility in himself to shed some perspective, maybe your life would look a little different.
Absolutely. No doubt.
And so
no doubt.
So tell me, speak to us, speak to some of the older folks, maybe some people that are looking at young people. Yeah. And instead of blaming them for everything, like, hey, they're always distracted. They're always on their phones. They don't know what they're talking about. They just feel so entitled. Yep. What is our responsibility? How do we approach younger people and share wisdom and offer perspective?
Yeah, I mean, and here's the thing. Like, I had a lot of athletic scholarships. I did have some academic scholarships. I had an ROTC scholarship, full ride. Yeah. Right. And so I had options. But to your point, this guy who was a teacher. First of all, shout out to the teachers. I think teaching is one of the most important professions in our nation, and I can do a whole nother thing on that. But he was my Western civilization teacher. I think I was in 9th or 10th grade. So here's the thing. I wasn't even in his class by the time I was a senior and making this. It's not like he was my current teacher. This is someone I maintain relationship with because I loved him and he loved me and I trusted him. And so he was one of the people when stuff was happening, because he followed my high school career, that I would always go to. I would go and ask him stuff about track. I would ask him, when I was selected to do the keynote address for my high school graduation, I ran that speech by him. I remember they were trying to get me to soften some of the language. And I was like, I know I didn't want to do it, but at the time I didn't have the thing to say to grown people, right? Because I was raised in the South. Like, you don't just, I didn't have it. And so I went to him. I was like, this is what they want me to do. He said, absolutely not. I said, can you come to the meeting? And he went and said, she's not going to change that. I was like, thank you. right? Because I didn't know I didn't know at 18 that I could say to a grown person, like, I'm not going to do that.
No.
I know I didn't want to do it. And he was like, no, we're not going to do that. So my point is that there was a mentorship relationship that was already happening, which gave me the ability to trust him when I was making major decisions in my life. And that's what happens. And so I want to say again, I'm more convicted than ever. I think this was partially because of so much work I've done in studying the book of Exodus and seeing how God introduced himself. I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We serve a God of generations, right? But also looking at the blessings and the curses that we see even in Exodus, like you say, for those who disobey me, there will be consequences for that to the third or fourth generations. But for those who love me, the blessings will come for thousands of generations. Wow. Thousands of generations. And so what I believe, Fredy, is the person you see sitting today is the product of prayers of my ancestors. Because I've known 5 generations on my mother's side, and I know some of my grandfather's people. These all Jesus-loving people. I'm living in the prayers of people that have come, and not just the prayers, the faithful service, the action of people who were before me for at least thousands of generations. And my point here is this. There are actions, choices, prayers, scholarship, money, mentorship, teaching, preaching, discipleship that we can do for people, not just our biological kids, for the next generation right now that can have ripple effects for thousands of generations should the Lord tarry. We may see that impact and we may not see that impact. But my point is, what I need older people to understand is that we have an invitation from the Lord to make that kind of kingdom impact. We have an invitation for the Lord to do that. And I believe that when we say yes to God, that God will be faithful to finish the things that he started in and through us. And we have no idea how people will show up and respond as a result of our faithfulness to the small things that God is asking us to do.
That is, I love that story. And I think that, you know, if we all rewind, and for those of us that can say like, thank you, Lord, there has to be a Papa Courses, you know, for a lot of us. I know I had them as well. As we wrap this up, you know, this book, Voices of Lament, there's something that you shared on someone else's show about how you notice how other cultures do a better job of grieving and creating spaces to lament, and that is a spiritual practice as well, as we see in this holy book. How Jesus did it, and they didn't check that at the door. He welcomed it, he embraced it, and he created space for it. I want to just ask a practical question. Okay, just going back to, you know, what was common, because, you know, just because the media loves to show it because they're in the business of garnering attention doesn't negate the fact that it's actually happening. How do we create space for people to grieve, for a people group to grieve, and then allow an individual to lament and us to come into their space of lamenting, even when we don't understand it?
And I want to clarify too, because when I said there wasn't a space for it, I wasn't talking about a cultural space from the culture of like what Black people or African Americans do. I was talking about the professional environment I was in. So I was at the Naval Academy when this started for me. Like, I lost my first significant person my senior year of high school. And then there was about 16 years, there was 16 years of my life where I lost 11 close family members. So I was only going home for funerals. And so of those 16 years, probably 11 of those years, counting my Naval Academy time, I was in the military environment. So there was no space within that environment. And really, when you think about it, my class is the first class of people to graduate from the Naval Academy post 9/11. So we graduated into wartime. So for an environment, a culture, a military professional culture where you're dealing with grief all the time, but the culture does not create space for you to grieve, that's unhealthy. And so that's what I was really speaking about, that I went home to bury my mother, and then I came back to school and everybody just act like business as usual.
Right.
And it was not business as usual for me. And so what I learned, the unfortunate thing I learned to do there was to stuff and to work, right? And I guess on one hand, it's a good thing I had work, because I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have something else to put my mind on.
Yeah.
Because it was just that difficult of a time. And so what I have learned as a result of spiritual direction, so how do we create space? I didn't start grieving until I went to seminary, of stuff that happened decade, 12 years before. Because I had a spiritual director that just simply asked me questions. You know, I wrote about this in my Sojourner Truth. One time he asked me, do you regret not being there when your mother died? Like, no one had ever asked me that. Anything close to that. No one had ever told me, made me think that they cared.
Wow.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I mean, what did that do for you?
I had space to be present with my own feelings about something that, one, was very difficult and very shaping in my life.
Let me ask you, when they asked you that, was that the first time you thought about that? Or was that a thought you'd had, like, man, I wish I would have been there when my mother died? Or was that the first time you actually thought about that question?
I don't think it's the first time I thought about it, but it was significant that someone else cared enough to ask me about it. And so we talk about creating space for people. You know, sometimes, and that's what I do a lot. You know, I think that's what I've done with this project, creating space to say, okay, for this time, in my mentoring book, Mentor for Life, I talk about there's a discipline of presence that we can practice. And sometimes presence means I'm just going to come and sit with you. You don't have to talk, but the fact that you know I'm in such a bad space that it's not good, the Bible says, for me to be alone, and you care enough to come and sit, is a ministry to me, right? Or you can ask questions and give me space to respond or not respond. You know, I remember when we lost our son, you know, one of my best friends, still to this day, she came and she said, you know, it's okay to cry. She came to visit me after work. And this is within a week's time of you know, the loss. She said, you know, it's okay to cry. And I said to her, I don't feel like crying right now. I've been crying all day. If you want to cry, go right ahead. You know what I'm saying? So there was an invitation. It's okay to cry. Like, you don't have to be strong right now in this moment. But then also there was space to say, you know, I don't feel like doing that right now. Yeah. Right? And then what she did was she just sat. So I wasn't there alone. Yeah. And so I'm saying, I think, especially post-pandemic, the unfortunate thing, but also the great thing, is that we have an opportunity to teach people how to be human again.
I think it's a missing component for sure in our circles. Natasha, I could talk to you. Like, I feel like we're just warming up. I have 15 questions to ask you. But the beauty is that we have you all day here. And the beauty of it is that other people know the value of your voice. And there are other podcasts, your podcast, you know, your blog. There are tons of resources where you're featured on. Yes. So I don't feel like I need to like hoard this time, as selfish as I want to be.
like somebody, one of my, I think it's my sister, and she said, "Where can I find your book?" Look, I said, "Look, just type my name in. I'm out there. Like you can find the book."
Yeah, exactly. You know what to do. So for those that listen in constantly listen to the Revive podcast, you know what to do. Yes. You know what to do. And one of the main things that I got out of this is like, do your homework. Like you can, if you're, I love that. If you're privileged enough to read. If you're privileged enough to use technology, use it. Natasha, is there any like, in 30 seconds, if there's any encouragement you'd like to give those that are watching this, as we wrap this up, don't want it to end, but we got to. And, but is there anything you'd like to encourage people with?
Listen, love God, love people, and tell the truth.
Tell the truth, which is something that we're going to talk about next time. as I dig, and you are a prophet. You are a voice to this generation, and I honor that. Thank you so much for being with us today. I appreciate it. If any of you guys want to know more about her, please go check out A Sojourner's Truth, the podcast. And you can get all information from her at her website, natashasrobinson.com. Yes. So make sure you look her up. Her blog is there. Her press kit is there. You want to invite her. You want to book her. Everything that you need to know about her is there. And then go ahead and follow all her social media accounts. She's pretty active, especially right now. And then remember, Voices of Lament just came out this September. And now it's October. Go get it, preferably from your local bookstore. But then go get it on Amazon. Leave a rating, a review on Amazon as well for this, because that helps a ton. Remember, go offer hope, ignite hearts, and live in freedom. We'll see you next time. See ya.